most times you realize you're not going to die. You're not going to get drugged. You're not going to get robbed, whatever it might be. And you're fine. And you go out and you have a really good time. So I'm really glad I didn't listen. Hello and welcome to the Blindseyepodcast, the podcast discussing everything you did and I didn't want to know about being blind. My name is Connor. Hope everybody is well. Today I thought I would talk about something fun. So I've kind of mentioned it before, but I thought I'd talk about going out. So nightlife, going to pubs, going to clubs, what I did, what my experiences were, what my anxieties were. Basically because I've gotten questions from people who are sighted, who wonder, how'd you do that? Is that not intimidating? Or, how do you get on a dance floor? And, how does it all work? And that kind of stuff. And I've also gotten questions or had questions from people who are blind themselves or vision impaired or something like that, who have asked, I was always a bit apprehensive to do that, and that kind of stuff. So I thought it was worth talking about it. As always, before we get started, if you could tell your friends, like, subscribe, share, follow on whatever platform you use, device you have. Also, shout out to the person who donated to buy me a coffee and chucked a couple of bucks my way. That was really kind of you, so I really appreciate that if you're listening. All right, so let's get cracking. Okay, so I'm going to break this into two parts really, is pubbing and clubbing. So I'll start with clubbing because that has a little bit more to it. I found that a little bit more challenging. There was a few more things that I used to have to do a little bit more differently. And also nowadays I mostly just go to the pubs instead of clubs. Well, nowadays when we can again, hopefully in a month's time. So let's start with clubbing. All right, so when me and my friends started clubbing when we were 18, I would go out with my mate, he's fully sighted, and it was really important to me that we both have a good time because I wanted to enjoy myself, but I didn't want him to have to be worrying about me. So what we used to do at this particular place where we would go all the time is we would go early, and we'd go early for the main reason, probably because we were dorks, but also because we wanted to get a really good seat. And that sounds really dumb when it comes to a nightclub. But the reason why is I would spend most of the night sitting down. So I wanted that, and so did he. But also, if we could get a good seat, then we tried to get a seat in an area where people would pass by, rather than being in a far-flung corner where nobody can see us. What we would do is we would park ourselves fairly close to the DJ booth. So if anybody wanted to go up and request a song, they would kind of have to walk past us, or they would at least see us, and we would have the closest table. So in our mind, it kind of fulfilled two things. It meant that I, who can't approach people and can't see them and walk up to them in a nightclub, was being seen. But it also meant that my mate could go and walk around the nightclub. He'd know where I was, and we were both just in a good spot in terms of hopefully maybe some ladies seeing us or whatever it might be, but it worked for both of us in that way. As I mentioned, that way he can wander around, and what it would also mean is that there's a very visible sight of me sitting there with an empty seat next to me. So what would basically happen is a lot more people would see, hey, that guy's sitting over there, there's a seat there, and I was in a lot more people's line of sight. So it was an easier way for me to meet people because naturally, especially when the music gets going and the crowd gets packed, I can't walk up to people. I mean, I can't see them in the first place regardless of anything else, but I can't walk up to people to approach them or whatever. So it was our way of getting them to approach me while also meaning that my sighted friend could do his own thing. He can wander around, and I was basically saving him a seat at the same time. So we were both, let's just say, maximizing our chances, our odds. The other thing my friend would do is when you can't see, sometimes you forget that body language is a big thing. So because I'm not looking at anything, I can tend to put my head down, either because I'm just not thinking about it, or sometimes it's because I get self-conscious and I don't want to be seen to be staring at something that I can't even tell I'm staring at. So sometimes I can put my head down or whatever, and then my friend would say to me, look, you don't look like you want to be approached. You don't look like you're having a good time. So that also came really useful because he was able to tell me certain things that made me look like I was either angry or like I was having a bad night when I actually wasn't. But obviously me realizing that, I kind of forgetting how I might look, even though that's not actually what I'm trying to portray to everybody else. So that was really, really helpful. Same again with fashion advice, because obviously that all changes. So, having a good mate that would tell you, this is what everybody's wearing. Yeah, you look fine. Or, hey, change this, your collar's up, whatever, if you can't tell something, because sometimes things happen, especially when you get a few drinks in you, not just if you're blind or have a disability. The other big thing for me was my cane. Especially at the time when I was 18, I barely, if any way, kind of used the cane at all independently. But obviously in a packed situation like that, it made sense to have it with me. So I kind of just eventually learned to embrace it, because people would see that, hey, this guy's blind, so, just heads up. But I also, learned to embrace it. If we would go for a dance, like I'd kind of use it to tap the beat out or whatever, and kind of realizing that not everything that's different necessarily has to be a bad thing, which is always the way I looked at it, and trying to just embrace the fact that I was comfortable with it, or faking that I was comfortable with it until the actual comfort came. And I mean, for the most part, especially in a nightclub or in a pub, I would never ever really use a cane unless it was very, very, very quiet, even now, because it's just not practical, especially when it's packed. So I would just go side a guy with my mate, or I'd just follow behind him with my hand on his shoulder or something like that, because it really just isn't that practical, even nowadays, which is why, like, if I go to a pub or a club now, I don't bring my guide dog if I can help it. Sometimes I want to, but once people are starting to get a bit messy, glasses get dropped, people get drunk, they want to try and pat her. So as much as I want her with me, and she's a bit of a chick magnet and stuff, I don't need her to have a stressful night, and I don't need to be worrying about her being stressed because I'm out to enjoy myself. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. Speaking of people being drunk, I thought it would be worth sharing as well that, I had a thing that used to happen, not so much nowadays, but in the early days when we'd go out and there's a lot of heavy drinking going on because we're idiots and didn't know our limits. But what used to happen was I'd get security guards or people in nightclubs thinking I was more drunk than I was, because maybe I had my head down, as I said. And sometimes I put my head down, as I mentioned, because I can't see anything. But they would take that as, oh, maybe that guy's really, really trashed. And in this one particular case I can think of, this guy came over and said, you need to get him out of here, he's too drunk. And my mate said, he's blind. And the guy's like, yeah, exactly, get him out. And we were like, what? And what he thought we meant like blind drunk. But I was just, putting my head down. And other cases that happened, but I actually was very, very drunk and probably maybe should have been asked to leave. But we, as 18, 19-year-old guys do, we would say, no, he's just blind, he just can't see. And the security guards would say, oh, okay, then don't worry about it. So it swings both ways. But I did actually have an instance where I don't actually think I had drunk too much, but I think I was unwell, and I had gone into the disabled bathroom. I think I'd gotten sick. And when I came out of the bathroom, there was 2 security guards waiting to escort me from the premises because they just assumed I was too drunk or something. But the funniest thing is, these guys actually escorted me out of the premises, and they walked me the whole way out. Not because both of them were needed to help me out, but it was like, do you think I am going to sneak back in past you both? Like, do you not think this is one man's job? I mean, and all the job he needs to do, if you're really focused on getting me out of here. I mean, all I need to do is just hold his elbow and he can guide me out because I can't find the exit. But like, am I going to sneak back in past his? So that only happened the once, but it is a weird story. I mean, some of those guys, I know they're only doing their job, but maybe aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I'm lucky too that I've only ever had one drunken injury in all my years. I'm 31 now. So, and that only happened 2 years ago, that I had an injury, and I don't personally think I think it was kind of a mixture of things. But yeah, I've been pretty lucky that, because sometimes people think, oh, well, is there not a risk of more things happening to you because you can't see? And I don't think so, but touch wood, nothing's ever happened apart from, like one thing in all these years. So to me, they're good odds. So the other thing about drinking, drinking's fun and can be fun and whatever, but there is the very real thing as well when you can't see. One is, are you picking up the right drink? That's happened to me. Sometimes the glasses all feel the same and you go, yep, cool. And then you drink it. And not only is it like, okay, germs, whatever, somebody else is drunken out of this, but you may not like the drink or whatever it might be. And it's just weird. So that was obviously a big thing. So I would always try and keep my hand touching my glass, for lack of a better word. And if ever I was going away from a table for an extended period of time, I'd basically just try and down my drink because I don't want the confusion when I come back. And also, you don't really know if someone's going to mess with it. So the other thing that I would do, I would always be holding my glass, and I'd always kind of hold my glass by the fingertips as though my palm was kind of hovering over the glass, like a bit of a spider on top of the glass. So that way I know that nobody can just surreptitiously walk past and drop anything in there just in case they think it would be hilarious for, to drug me or something like that. Because, there are people like that, not necessarily because they want to attack you or anything, but there are people who just think, oh, that would be funny. So that was one thing I would do. Or if my drink was in a bottle, I would always make sure my thumb was over the entrance to the bottle and stuff like that. And a lot of people do that, even if they don't have disabilities or if they can see, because it can be a shady world out there, especially if you're in places like that. So those are kind of some of the things I would do to make sure I was all good. So that's basically all for clubbing. Some of that covers pubs as well. But as I said, mostly now I'm kind of more interested in maybe just going for like a social drink at a pub or something like that, or a bar, or going to live music. Clubbing days are probably mostly kind of behind me, even though I wouldn't mind every now and then. But yeah, but what I do as well is sometimes I go to karaoke. I like to have a sing. It's a good laugh. And in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, how can I do karaoke? I can't read the screen. Everyone else is reading off a screen. And again, in the beginning, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to look so blind, for the lack of a better word. I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb or whatever. And thankfully, I had good mates around me that, who were sighted or whatever. And they were taking the piss as well. Like they were just enjoying themselves. And we would just actively try and ruin songs. So after a while, it just became a thing like, it doesn't matter if you're not reading the right lyrics, because we would make up our own lyrics anyway because it was amusing to us. Because eventually we were like, well, we're just trying to have a laugh. So yeah, if you go in and you think it's going to be X Factor and there's going to be somebody in the pub who's going to, put you on TV and tell a sob story about your cat dying, then you'll feel under the pump if you can't read the lyrics. But for us, it wasn't really a thing. So I do find that a good laugh now. So before I wrap up, I also thought I would talk about some of the other challenges that can arise and some of the really good nights that I've had. So some of the things that can come up is that, again, you come in contact with some interesting people who maybe aren't out to have a great time, or they're out to have a great time but at your expense. So I have had things where I was on a dance floor and I was dancing and people were dancing in front of me and kind of taking the piss and not realizing that I couldn't see them, even though they were kind of mocking me or whatever. So, that can happen. Thankfully, I've got good mates who would get me out of there. But it's one of those things sometimes I didn't realize maybe I had a few people around me who thought the fact that I was there was hilarious rather than neat. So those kinds of things can happen. And hopefully those people are having a miserable life. But those kinds of things can happen. The other thing that happened several times, especially if I was going out with female friends, is you go into the bathroom and you go into the bathroom and people always have a chat in the bathroom, and you would overhear guys making comments about like, oh, look at all those hot chicks or whatever with that blind guy. Like, why are they with him? And I used to find that really hard because it's kind of like, they're wasted on him, or like, beautiful women are unattainable for somebody who can't see, or whatever it might be. And I used to find that quite hard because it would just ruin my night. And, you're out to have a good time, and then you'd come across smack talking like mouth breathers like that, basically, who was like, I didn't have the right to be there with good looking women, and how could they, and they definitely wouldn't be interested in me or whatever. And I would find that very hard because I didn't have the guts to say, hey guys, I can hear you, shut the hell up, or worse. But it took me a while to get over that, and probably still really haven't, but thankfully I haven't really encountered that in a long time. Another thing that can happen is if you're in a place, particularly that's very busy, you may not feel comfortable finding the bar on your own. And that happens a lot. So what can happen is you are trying to, what I would do is I try and listen out for when I can hear people that I'm with going to the bar, so that I can say, hey, look, if I give you some money, would you mind getting me this? Because they're going anyway. Because I find it really hard to say, look, you're sitting down nicely, you're enjoying yourself, would you mind going and getting me a drink? Because they might not mind, but you worry about being a burden. You worry about like somebody going, oh, come on, man, I just want to sit down and enjoy myself. I don't want to have to go and get something for you. But then you go, well, I've sat here for a couple of hours, and I haven't known when anyone was going to the bar because maybe it was a bit noisy, which I'll come on to, or whatever. So what I try and do is make sure I kind of listen out for when people are going to the bar. But most of my mates are pretty good now. They know the drill. If they're going to the bar, they'll go, hey, do you need anything? So I can get on board if I want to. But yeah, it can be hard. I have had a couple of instances where, you're just sitting there forever and you don't want to ask because you don't want to, be a burden or being seen to be a burden or whatever. And, everyone's just coming back and forth to the bar, and you're just sitting there dry. So, that can happen. And again, with that in mind, the other thing that can happen and has happened is sometimes you can find yourself sitting on your own for long periods because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I can't wander around and speak to people. So you can be sat there and you don't want anybody to have to sit with you and stay there and occupy you because you want them to enjoy their night. But, sometimes it can happen where you're sitting down for 40 minutes to an hour, particularly as the night gets on and people get more drunk, because naturally none of us are really thinking straight, and you're just kind of sitting down for an hour, and you may want to get a drink, or you may want to go home, or you may need the loo. And if it's somewhere you haven't been before, you may not always be able to move freely to do that. So you're kind of a little bit stuck. And the other thing that contributes to that is very noisy places, because I guess there is that stereotype that, oh, well, blind people can hear everything. Their hearing must be awesome. But as we all know, you can be in places that the din is really, really loud, and there's almost so much noise going on that it's very hard to hear anything. So especially your friends or people it can be very hard to pick their voices out. If I can, and I hear them off in the distance, now I kind of have the courage to just get up and go, oi, and just shout across a room, because sometimes that's just what it takes. But, sometimes you don't have that luxury, or you don't have that, you're a bit anxious about doing that, which is totally understandable. And the noise then can kind of mean that you aren't really sure what's going on, because it's just overload. One thing which I didn't mention is you can get the opposite. So you can get people, especially as the night goes on, that maybe are really curious about asking you something. And as a rule, I'm fine with that. But we all know when people get really, really drunk, you can get people who sort of latch onto you and they want everything in the conversation between you and them to almost use that to find out everything they've always wanted to ask and never had the guts to ask. And sometimes you don't mind, but sometimes you're like, I'm trying to enjoy my night. I really don't need you asking me, how long was I sad when I lost my sight? Sometimes you don't mind that or whatever, but again, when someone's that drunk and they can't take a hint and you're trying to be polite and you don't necessarily have the ability to run away or walk away because you don't know which direction to go, you can find yourself cornered with some interesting characters who are probably harmless, but are a bit of a buzzkill. So that is another thing that can happen. And finally, I thought I would just explore something that was said to me actually not too long after I turned 18 by a fellow member of the quote-unquote blind community. And this guy basically thought that I was really selfish going to a bar or a nightclub or a concert because that was reckless of me and dangerous, and how could I possibly put that responsibility on my friends to have to look after me all night and all this kind of stuff. And I guess that's kind of stuck with me, but I do think it's bullcrap because my friends want to go out with me, and I'm sure it's probably not as easy and a carefree night as if I wasn't there, but thankfully I have good mates who would prefer I was there, and we've worked out ways of us both getting what we want from the experience so that I also feel included and they don't feel like a carer. At least I hope to God that's the case. They've never said otherwise, but I do think that's bullcrap what this person said to me because, again, I've never had any issues apart from one in, 10 plus years of going out. But I've had a lot of really good times, and you can't just stay in your room and wrapped up in, bubble wrap, because I've had so many more, good nights and memories and met people. And yeah, things might go wrong and yeah, that sucks. But the alternative is to never go out and never experience this stuff. And yeah, it took me a while to get there myself. I was really anxious about it and terrified. What if something goes wrong? But most times you realize you're not going to die. You're not going to get drugged. You're not going to get robbed, whatever it might be. And you're fine. And you go out and you have a really good time. So I'm really glad I didn't listen to that person. But sometimes there can be that mentality. So yeah, thankfully I didn't listen to that person. And, with that in mind, talking about responsibility, me and my mate Guy, and I know Guy listens to this, so he'll like that I share this. But as an example, me and Guy were out one night at a gig, and we were both really, really drunk, and we were trying to get home. And Guy was probably a little bit too drunk, and we weren't really sure. And so I had to get Guy home, and we were about 40 kilometers from home. And we got home, and I got him home. And I would just say to him, look off in the distance. Which way is the city lights? And he's like, that way. And I said, well, just walk that way. And, it worked. And, Guy was really worried the next day. Oh, sorry, I put you in that position. But it's a great story. Nothing bad happened. I was able to get him home. I was happy to help him in need because he's helped me when I was in need. And it's hilarious. So, I don't really go in for all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely doable. You definitely just have to get kind of creative about it, work out what you're comfortable with, what your friends or whoever you're with is comfortable with, do a bit of planning if you can, do a bit of a recce, but it's doable. So anyway, I thought I would share that. Hope that was interesting. As always, you can get in touch with me by emailing blindseyepodcast@gmail.com. That's BLINDSEYE podcast@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram if you search for Blindseye Podcast. I'm on Twitter @BlindseyePod. And if you want one website for it all, just go to blindseyepodcast.com. And I'll be back to speak to you in a fortnight. Cheers.